Welcome to the Consulting Success Podcast with your host, Michael Sapersky, where we take you deep into the world of elite consultants.
Hey, it's Michael Sapersky here, and today I'm very excited to have with us John Murphy. John, welcome.
Michael, indeed, it's a great pleasure to be here.
So, John, for those of our listeners who don't know you, just take a minute, explain where you're based and what it is that you do.
Okay, I will. The company I have is called John Murphy International, which is probably not the most novel name to have given your company to call it after yourself, but it does reflect kind of an international element to the business. And I've been doing that for 13 years, and really my focus is helping global companies create winning teams. So that's what I'm doing right now, and that's my main focus right now. And that's been a bit of an evolution from the time that I started 13 years ago to where I am today, which I think is just the history of most businesses, where it kind of pivots and changes at different times.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And where are you based right now?
Well, I'm based in the south of France. I mean, with the surname like Murphy, it's a bit of a giveaway that I'm Irish. And so I'm originally from Ireland, from Dublin. And I spent most of my career in Dublin and started the business while I was still in Dublin. And about 6 years ago, because again, one of those pivots and changes in the business, I recognized that really, I did not need to be based there, and I could really base myself anywhere. And we moved here to the south of France, and we've been living here ever since. And, I travel a lot for business, but it's a beautiful part of the world. It's a great place to live, and I have the opportunity to travel internationally.
Right. Beautiful. Well, let's rewind a little bit here into your history before starting John Murphy International and before working with global organizations, helping them with their teams and so forth, which I want to also dig into more. What were you doing? I mean, what's your background? I know that you spent some time, moving up the ranks in the corporate world. What were you doing, just before going out into consulting? What did that look like?
Well, I did the very traditional kind of corporate career in the sense I started off in the insurance industry. I started off as a door-to-door salesman, and then kind of progressed from there, and then I became a sales manager, and then I became a sales director, and then I became a marketing director. And the last role that I had, and that was with a couple of different companies, and the final role that I had was as a CEO of a life company. And I did that for 7 years. So I really kind of came through the organization in a very traditional way, but moved through the ranks particularly from the kind of sales and marketing side, and then progressed to the CEO. But I also discovered that, while I've no gripe with corporate world, because it was extremely good to me, and I hope I was good to it, but it certainly was very good to me. But I recognized when I got to that level and got to that senior level, that, the journey was great, but when I got there, the destination wasn't everything I thought it was going to be.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I really enjoyed kind of the progression, because I've always been ambitious. So it was always the ambition to get to the next level, the next level, and the next level. And then when you get to kind of the kind of board level and CEO level, then you kind of say, okay, well, this is what I've been, fighting for and scrapping for and working hard for, and this was a big focus. And, and you look around and say, well, am I really enjoying it now? And I discovered that I enjoyed the journey, but when I got there and I kind of saw where I was, after the initial kind of phase of excitement and joy, and also we'd gone through a period of significant expansion, and then it moved more towards a period of consolidation. And I just felt that just wasn't something that interested me, and I really didn't want to continue in that role. But, it's all very well saying that I want to leave. But, as you know, Michael, from a senior level in the corporate world, you're well paid, you're well looked after, you've got all the benefits and the frills that go with that. To kind of step out and to start from scratch on your own can be a big ask. But I'd have to say it wasn't as big as I thought it was going to be. And it was almost something that I felt I was compelled to do.
So how in advance of actually, leaving the role of CEO and starting your own consulting business, did you start thinking about making that switch?
It probably was 2 years in the making.
Okay.
And I probably, kind of, because you go through a period, you say, well, maybe it's just because I'm a bit bored or I'm a bit fed up or I'm a bit whatever it might be. That I kind of get through it and I work through it and I find something else that'll make me excited.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized that fundamentally I just didn't want to stay being an employee.
Right.
And I really wanted to start to create. So there's nothing wrong with the company or wrong with the organization. It was just I had changed. And I recognized that I really needed to do something on my own and create my own business, because I never felt that I was the absolute corporate animal. I enjoyed the roles that I had because they were interesting and exciting and challenging and all of that. But I always had this kind of the back of my head. I always thought, I'd love to do something on my own. I'd love to do my own business. And I kind of made the decision to leave before I made the decision what I would do when I left.
Mm-hmm.
If that doesn't sound like an odd way of doing it.
Yeah, and when you did leave, though, when you finally made the decision to go out and start your consulting business, how did you go about getting clients? What was the first one or two engagements? Where did they come from?
Well, I also remember actually when I made the decision to leave and do what I was going to do, I had a very good friend. He still is a very good friend, despite what he said to me. But a very good friend who was in the consulting business.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I'd go and see him. So we had a cup of coffee or lunch, whatever it was, together. And I told him what I was doing. And he said to me, Murph, he said, the world needs another consultant like a hole in the head. Right?
Right.
Which really kind of filled me with joy. But his addition to that was but there's always room for a good one.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was very relevant. And the second thing he said to me, he said, you won't get business from the places that you think you will, and you will get business from very surprising places.
Mm-hmm.
And that turned out to be exactly true. So when I left, go back to your question, when I left, because I would have been very much associated with financial services, I was absolutely passionate that I was not going to get stuck in financial services and be seen as a consultant for financial services just because I came from there. Because I felt that what I was talking about and what I was doing was absolutely applicable to industries other than financial services.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really worked terribly, terribly hard and I went to see kind of everybody every contact that I had, every connection that I had, to go and meet them and tell them what I was doing. And I really just did a huge number of sales calls. It was very unscientific, I'd have to say. But I very much focused on non-financial services. And I was very fortunate that one of my early successes in terms of getting work was with Johnson & Johnson,
mm-hmm.
which was great, and it was fantastic to get it, but it also gave me a brand company that I could say that I worked for that was non-financial services, that took me away from what I was afraid I would get stuck in.
And did that come just from making calls and doing follow-up?
It did, absolutely. Very unscientific. To a large extent, I kind of went back to my door-to-door selling insurance and said, it's about numbers of calls. So I just went and I spoke to as many people I could, and I asked everybody that I spoke to, could they recommend me to go and speak to somebody else? Mm-hmm. And that was how that came about.
And what percentage of those people were people that you had some relationship with already, versus those that you had no relationship with?
Well, interesting enough, actually, that probably when I remember actually looking at it, and in my first year, 50% of my business had come from people that I hadn't met before I started.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And 50% had come from people that I'd met. But they were not always, even the people that I'd met that I got business from, some of those would not have been on my kind of, oh yeah, I'll definitely get business there tag.
What percentage would you say of all of the calls and all of the follow-ups and, all of the activity that you did, would you say actually resulted in business?
Well, I'd say that once I got to a kind of a real serious conversation, rather than hello, how are you? This is what I'm doing. But when I got to a real serious conversation, my conversion rate was probably about 1 in 3.
Right. But from all the people that you reached out to, even to get to the serious conversation, was there a lot of activity required to?
Oh yes, there's a lot of activity.
And I'm focusing on that a little bit, John, because I think that a lot of consultants, even when their business is a little bit more developed, if their goal is to win more business, they look at this idea of, okay, I'm an expert in my area, or my team, my firm is an expert in a specific area, but really a lot of people are uncomfortable with the idea of going out there and making the calls, doing the outreach, doing the follow-up. But it's very clear from your story that you did it. I mean, were you afraid? Was there any fear there? Was there any discomfort, or what was going through your mind when you were just having to make call after call, or email after email, or follow-up after follow-up?
Well, I mean, there's no doubt that there were tough times. I mean, and also I said, don't forget that I gone from 1 month getting a very healthy check going into my bank account as a salary to the next month to zero.
Right.
Yeah, and that kind of focuses the mind hugely. And secondly was, you believe that you can do it and you trust that you can do it, but you need to get some validation that actually what you're going out in the story you're selling, that people actually see that this is something that they would pay for. So, when you're doing an awful lot of calls and you're not getting anywhere, there is that little doubt that creeps into your mind, is that, gosh, have I got this right? And, and you just got to keep on doing calls and keep at it. So, I mean, it was very unscientific. And I said, I very much kind of went back to, as I said, to my day selling insurance door to door, where it was just volume of calls.
Right.
And, once you then get momentum, then you're able to refine it a little bit more. But you still need to do that number of calls. And to be very honest with you, Michael, it's not a lot different now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's still,
it's still, if you don't continuously, crank up the prospecting and the connecting and all of that sort of thing, 13 years later, 14 years later, you're doing it slightly differently, but nevertheless, the same principle applies. If you're not doing it, you're going to end up with these peaks and troughs in your flow of income.
Right. I mean, yeah, I know you and I have had these conversations about how important it is, even for consultants that have, successful and developed businesses, right? To always be keeping the foot on that accelerator, because the moment that you take it off, the moment, that you actually become a bit complacent and feel like, oh, things are good enough, is the moment that all of a sudden you start to see these gaps, and they might not appear right away, but they start to appear, and then you have to almost start from scratch, or it takes a lot longer to get that momentum back. So I want to switch a little bit now, because I know that in your business, John, referrals have played a large, role in new business, as they do for many consultants. But it seems like the vast majority of your business has come from referrals. Once you started kind of getting clients as a consultant, what do you feel is the biggest factor for in your case, and just maybe for others as well, in being able to get a good stream of referrals? And here you are, even 13, 14 years into your consulting business, and referrals still play a very big role for you.
While we work with a lot of seasoned and experienced consultants here at Consulting Success, I'm often contacted by new early-stage consultants. Invariably, the question I'm asked is, what are the steps I should take to become a successful consultant and grow my consulting business to my first 6 figures per year? Well, I'm excited to announce that we've opened the doors for our Momentum program. This is our most popular program for early stage consultants, and it has helped almost 1,000 consultants to start, run, and grow successful consulting businesses. It gives you the step-by-step plan to help you with your messaging, your fees, and pricing strategies, how to win more proposals, how to go to market more effectively, developing a marketing system to generate leads consistently, and so much more. And right now, until September the 19th, you can sign up for Momentum and get 50% off the regular price by going to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO. Only 100 spots are available to join Momentum and get 50% off. This deal is only available until September the 19th, or until all 100 spots are gone. We won't be opening up new spots in this program for several months, so don't wait. Go to consultingsuccess.com/audio. That's consultingsuccess.com/audio, AUDIO.
I think that it's kind of, I say it on two levels. One is that, you will only, and this might be kind of stating the obvious, but I'll say it anyway. You're only going to get referrals if you're doing excellent work with the client that you're working with. Mm-hmm. That's for starters. So I think that you really do have to have an attitude of you're always going to go the extra mile, that you're going to add value to the client that you're working with. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think that that's got to be, principle number one. So that, when you get into an organization, particularly a large organization, and I work with a lot of global organizations, and the most important thing is that if you're doing good work in that organization, people will just refer you on to other people within that organization. Yeah. So it's important that you're doing that, and that you really get to know the organization terribly well. Because I find that when I, not just talking about the work that I'm doing with the individual in organization, but to find out what's actually happening in that organization. And that alerts you to, some changes over here, some changes over there, some changes in the organization, where you can actually then readily see, well, I could actually make a difference there, or I could really contribute there. And if you're not spending the time and investing the time, not just in delivering the service that you committed to and that you're contracted to, but also engaging in that conversation about what's happening in their organization, both to help the people that you're talking to, because then you know the context of their business that they're in, but it's also giving you information about what's happening in their company that can alert you to other changes. And I've had loads of examples of that where, in a conversation we'll say, oh, there's a change going on, or there's been a restructuring over there. And, I very often say, well, listen, could you introduce me to the person who's doing that reorganization, to that restructuring? And, if you're doing good work, of course they will.
Right. So for you to identify those opportunities, though, John, I mean, is it just a matter of having conversations with your clients and the people that you're working with, or is there some other approach that you've taken to be able to learn more, like really deeply understand what's going on in those organizations to find those opportunities?
Yeah, I think certainly it's a very effective to kind of make sure that you're having the conversations with the people that you're talking to about what's happening in the organization. But there are other things. You can do alerts on Google and things like that you actually can get flagged when things are going on in those organizations, particularly in larger organizations. It's easier to do that with them. Mm-hmm. So I would have alerts on Google for, various companies that I'm doing business with, so that I can, get bits of information. And, sometimes, the majority of times it's not particularly relevant to what I'm doing or the space that I'm in. But it does help to keep you informed about that organization. And then you're able to speak to the people, because, don't forget, for every client that I'm working in within, even if it's a large corporate global company, the world they're dealing with is the organization that they're dealing with. And the more I know about that organization, the more I can help them. Mm-hmm. So, it feeds lots of different things within that. So I think just having that market information about what's happening in the organization, who's moving, who's changing, where they're opening, where they're closing, where they're reorganizing, where they're restructuring, where they're investing, where they're divesting, all of that just helps in the conversation. And it makes you a much more informed advisor to those people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a really great point that you're sharing here, John, because a lot of consultants consider getting new clients in different companies as the best way to grow their business. But I would say that, in fact, what we call client development, which is what you've been doing so well here, looking for opportunities within your existing clients and within those existing relationships is actually a far better way, right? Because you have the relationships already established, and you're able to win business much more readily because you require significantly less time to work through that sales cycle. So for everyone listening, right, if business development, if growth is something that is important to you, which likely it is, right, that's why you're here, what John is sharing is a really great example that I would suggest everyone, look at is what opportunities are there right now, at your fingertips with your existing or even your past clients, even before you just go out and think about, new client acquisition. There's almost always opportunities that are there. So, John, things have been bubbling along, right? Your business has reached a nice level of success, and then you decide to leave Ireland and to go to France. Like, what really prompted that? Why why leave your home base where you've built up this, this business, there's success happening? Like, why pick up and go to another country?
Funny, my wife was asking the same question at that time.
Yeah.
It was, I can't say that it was a kind of a single event, but what had happened was, if you go back to the market, if you go around about 2006, 2007, when the economic crash happened, and a lot of the work that I've been doing beforehand was kind of fairly, kind of big ticket stuff with clients. But I've been fortunate in that I've been asked to do a lot more one-to-one coaching with, CEOs and senior directors and companies, and that had evolved. And I played with the model with that, because the traditional model of going, where I go to your office, Mike, on a Tuesday morning from 9 to 12, and we spend 3 hours going, you just don't have the time for that, and nobody has. So, I was playing with that model, and then I ended up kind of doing it on Skype or variations of Skype, because people were traveling and it was easier and it was more cost effective and everything like that. So that was happening. That suddenly kind of opened up my eyes and kind of said, well, hang on a second. If I'm doing a lot of work on Skype and places like that, I don't have to confine myself to the geographical space that is Ireland, the island of Ireland. I can really open it out, which is really where the international element kind of said, hang on, I can actually be, broader than this. And I also knew that if I didn't make the physical move out of the country, I would never have made the kind of the mental shift, because it would have been too easy to kind of stay where I was and do what I was doing. And so we said, okay, kids are growing up and they've moved away. So myself and my wife said, okay, listen, let's go and do it. Let's try it for 2 years. If it works, great. And if, we're happy, not just in the business, but personally as well, fine. But if we don't, then we go back. And then that suddenly kind of said, mentally, that kind of was one of those pivots, whereas, hang on, I can do business anywhere.
Right.
So I now started to look for, companies outside of Ireland. And I discovered companies in France, companies in Germany, companies in Spain, companies in Norway. And suddenly the world just becomes a bigger place. And that then just kind of created its own pivot with the business. So that was kind of part of the thinking was, listen, I can do this more internationally, but if I stay where I am, I'll always be kind of better known in that market and never make that move. So to an extent, it was to force me to really kind of make that international element to it. And I'm delighted that I did, because it's just enriched my experience. And I think that it's enabled me then with my clients to bring a much richer experience to them.
Did you have concerns? Some people would be exploring that idea themselves, right, in their mind, going, well, I'd like to work from different places or to travel more, whatever it might be, but I can't do that because my clients want to see me face to face. Like, were you concerned that you might lose business or lose opportunities? Or just how did you handle that from a mindset perspective?
Well, I did have some concern, I'd have to say. And I also recognized that, I was limiting, that, I wasn't going to be able to replicate everything I was doing in Ireland if I wasn't living there. So I was going to have to make some trade-offs. So there was a bit of a gamble, but I just kind of felt intuitively that it was right. And I felt, I need to do this. Now, I'd many false starts and, kind of went down cul-de-sacs and different avenues that didn't work out. But I was absolutely determined that, this can work. And this is a model that I believe can work. And I had converted some of my clients in Ireland to work with me virtually. And one or two were saying, oh, I don't know. I don't think that'll work. I'm not sure that'll work. I like to see it face to face. I said, listen, try it. Right. And we tried it. And I actually genuinely didn't lose any client in terms of, kind of saying, no, I'm not going to do it because it's virtually.
Yeah. I
didn't lose anybody doing that. People kind of initially, and of course now, even in that 5 or 6 years, it's become a lot more acceptable.
Yeah.
And so it made the transition. So yes, it was a bit of a risk and there was a bit of a, can I make it work? But I kind of, I'm also quite stubborn, Mike, as you probably know from the conversations we've had, that I was just absolutely determined to actually make this model work and then see where I could explore. So, it's not just all virtual. I do face-to-face work with people in different parts of the world. But, the one-to-one coaching I do virtually.
Yeah, no, I think that the point that you made there about when you got an objection from a client saying, well, no, we'd like to see you. Some people would just give into that and say, okay, I guess my clients, aren't open to that idea of working virtually. I guess this is not going to work, and they would just stop there. But at the point that you made of how you came back and just suggested, like, hey, let's try it, right? You challenged back to your client is so important in so many aspects of building a consulting business. And so for everyone listening, right, just remember there's a reason why you became a consultant or why you have a growing consulting firm. And it really, in many cases, is because you want that freedom, you want that flexibility, you want to create what you want to create. And so just because a buyer is used to something, whether it's your pricing, hourly model versus moving to ROI and value, or it's how you work with them, or it's where you work with them, just because they come back with what they're used to doesn't mean that that's the way that it needs to be. And so, John, I think that's a beautiful example of just opening up their eyes and their mind to giving it a shot and then seeing that it actually can work out, and you then being able to make that shift to working virtually successfully.
And as you know, Mike, because we've had this conversation from there, I spent the last month in the US, and I was able to, I dealt with my clients that needs to be dealt with in that month, and some of them were aware I was in the US, some of them didn't know, and it wasn't relevant.
Yeah, your business just ticked along.
Exactly.
Yeah. What would you say, John, is in your mind the biggest, and maybe there's more than one, but what are the biggest or the one biggest factor that you feel has really helped you to stay at the top of your game, to continue to build your business, to get more clarity, to stay focused? What's really helped you?
I think that one of the things that really does help is accepting the fact that it is dynamic and it's always changing. And that to me is very motivating. It's scary, but it's motivating. And that you always have to look at how you're evolving and changing the business. It doesn't stand still. And you can't just say, okay, I've got that and that's it. And that's what I'm going to continue doing. You always have to tweak it and tweak it and tweak it. And and I think that's what makes it exciting. I think that's what keeps all of us fresh. And you're trying new things and you're trying different things and you're seeing what works, because you're always looking to, it's about building your business, but it's also about how can I give a better service to the clients that I'm dealing with and to the future clients that I'm dealing with. So I think that's one thing. I think the other thing that really is helpful, is the work that you and I have done, Michael, in terms of having somebody like you who challenges me kind of, well, why are you doing that? Or why aren't you doing that? Or what is it you're trying to achieve? Because working on your own can, you can start to believe your own publicity and your own, that your own opinions are always the right opinions. And that's dangerous. And I think that being part of, working with somebody like yourself and being part of the group that you have, where you do have that kind of mastermind group, and you do have other people you can bounce off, and working with somebody like you where you're being challenged and you're kept on track. I think they're the things that kind of keep it fresh and keep you energetic, because I have a very low threshold of boredom. And I would always say that I actually become a bit dangerous to myself and anybody else when I do get bored.
Right.
And, because I get sloppy if I get bored. And I think that having that constant challenging, but I think it is recognizing that, it's always changing.
Yeah.
I think it's looking outside your own industry. I spent some time when I was in the US going to a non-consulting conference that just would open your eyes to other elements. And I think it's all the time looking at what you can do to make your business more evolved. And, and the interesting thing is that, what you've helped me do is actually become more focused. So it's not about making the approach broader. It's actually quite the opposite. And that does help an awful lot. But I would suggest that I wouldn't have done that on my own.
Right. Well, John, it's been a real pleasure. Really enjoyed having you share a bit of your story and your wisdom with everyone here. What's the best way for people to learn more about you and to connect with you?
Well, they can go to my site, which is www.johnmurphyinternational.com, or they can email me at john@johnmurphyinternational.com, or they find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and the usual place like that. But the website's probably the best place to go.
Good stuff. Definitely suggest you guys check out what John's up to. John, again, thank you so much for coming on here and spending some time with us.
Michael, it's been a real pleasure and honor, and I'm delighted to have the time with you.
Thanks, John.
Are you ready to take your consulting business to the next level? Learn more about the Accelerator Coaching Program at consultingsuccess.com.